In the silent film era, when cinema was seen as more of a fringe medium, women held a lot of power. Frances Marion was the highest paid screenwriter in the 20s and 30s, and 100 of her films were made. And Lois Weber was the highest paid director in 1916 and the first woman to start her own studio. Between 1912 and 1919, Universal's roster of 11 female directors made 170 films. And women screenwriters wrote half of all movies copyrighted between 1915 and 1925. Women were prevalent in the industry at this time for many reasons. The studio wanted to hire more women because white middle-class women were their target demographic, as they made up to 83% of the movie-going audience. It also wasn't taken very seriously. It wasn't the multi-million-dollar business that it is today. And during World War I, many of the men were away at war. Their stories would cover topics such as birth control, drug abuse, abortion, poverty, cross-dressing, sexual orientation, and their female protagonists would not be necessarily chasing romance, but how to become a resistance fighter or to become an aviator. Yes, these women were all white women. People of color were not given the same opportunities, but they were able to carve out their own spaces. Such as Marianne Wong, who acted, wrote, produced, and directed her own films and started her own production company in Oakland. Maria P. Williams from Kansas City, who's considered the first Black female producer. Tressie Sodders, considered the first Black female filmmaker, also from Kansas City. And Oscar Michaud in Chicago, who made about 40 films, many of them about race. But with the invention of the talkie and the growing influence of cinema, Wall Street moved in to invest, and studios started consolidating. In 1920, there were 100 production companies, but by 1933, there were only 7. With the increased investment, salaries were higher and the jobs became more attractive to men, and the investors were primarily interested in backing companies led by men. Additionally, because cinema was becoming more influential, media scholar Bridget Connor describes fears of a female contamination of the culture and the tyranny of the female screenwriter. Thus began a systemic elimination of women from key and influential roles in Hollywood. Nearly 100 years later, a study found that of the top 100 grossing films of 2017, 8% were directed by women and 10% were written by women. Unfortunately, due to intentional destruction, neglect, and fires, most of these women's works have been lost. Only 14% of the American silent films that were made and released have survived.